evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Katerina Diepels. I'm the Advancement Communications Associate at the Preservation Society. But I'm also a member of our membership team, along with Sam Talbot and Jamie Ashola, who you saw right out front. And I want to thank you all so much for being here. As you know, this is a members-only lecture, so thank you all for being members. Without your support, none of this would be possible, so we are very grateful, and we're super excited to be able to offer this lecture to you tonight. Before we get into it, I do just have some information to share with you. First, I want to thank our summer lecture series presenting sponsor, Grandee Masonry, and I would also like to thank our partners in preservation, Bank Newport, Bartlett Tree Experts, and Grandee Masonry. Along with you guys, they also help to support our mission, so thank you to them. We are about halfway through the summer. It's been very busy. It continues to be very busy, so I just want to let you know about a few things coming up on the horizon. For members-only opportunities, and because you're here tonight, you're the first ones to hear about these. We will be having a series of curator-led tours of Richard Morris Hunt in a new light on select dates, and the first one will be on July 30th. On Saturday, August 16th, which is during a weekend of coaching, we will be having a members tent to watch the coaching exhibition on the back lawn of the Elms. And on Sunday, August 31st, will be our 5th annual Member Appreciation Night. That is the Sunday of Labor Day weekend, so mark your calendars now. And like I said, just keep an eye on your emails and the website so that as more details come forward with those. Some upcoming lectures we have are the Jacqueline and William P. Egan lecture on July 29th and the Ido and Peter Kiernan lecture on August 5th. Both of those will be presented by our research fellows here at the Preservation Society, and they will be presenting on their research that they've done over the last year. And then on August 14th, so right before coaching weekend, or beginning it, we will be hosting a lecture about coaching called Coaching Weekend Behind the Scenes. And registration and tickets are open for all of those lectures right now. But now turning to tonight's lecture, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have two. So first is Patricia Miller, who is our Chief Conservator. She joined the Preservation Society as Chief Conservator in 2015. She works directly with conservators, curators, collections management staff, and site stewards to preserve the historic collections and structures here. She trained as a sculpture and building conservator and received a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a Master's of Science from Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Preservation, and Planning. Prior to joining the Preservation Society, Patricia worked for several private conservation firms specializing in architecture, object, and monument conservation for clients including Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, and the National Park Service. Our second speaker is Heather Hodge, who is our textile conservator. She has a BA in art history. Prior to graduate school, she worked in the conservation department at several institutions, including the Brooklyn Museum, the National Park Service, and the New York Public Library. She received her master's and certificate of advanced study in art conservation from the SUNY Buffalo State Garment Art Conservation Department in 2021, where she specialized in textiles. During graduate school, she completed internships at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields and the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. Prior to joining the Preservation Society, she was a postgraduate fellow at the Winterthur Museum, where she had the honor to contribute to the exhibition Anne Lowe, American Couturier. So I'm going to step away and let Patty start off this evening's conservation lecture, and please save your questions till the end. We will have time for that. Come on up, Patty.
Switching, do I have to hit it to switch, or do you? Is it expecting it to switch to the title slide? There we go. Now we can start. Good evening. I am Patricia Miller, Chief Conservator at the Preservation Society. And tonight, Textile Conservator Heather Hodge and I will share some of the research, discoveries, and treatments that are ongoing as part of the project to preserve and present the third floor of the breakers. For those of you that may be unfamiliar with the breakers, or maybe haven't had the opportunity yet to take the Preservation in Progress tour of the third floor, I will begin with some essential background information and a summary of the project. As you may know, the breakers was built between 1893 and 1895 for Cornelius Vanderbilt II and his wife Alice and their children as a summer residence in Newport. The building was designed in the Italian Renaissance style by architect Richard Morris Hunt, and the grand interior spaces of the first floor, which you're probably very familiar with, give way to more subdued yet stylish interiors in the second and third floor bedrooms, which were designed for the family by Ogden Codman Jr. The third floor of the breakers is divided into two parts. The family section, indicated here in pink, and the staff section, indicated in blue, which actually consists of two floors referred to as floors 3 and 3.5. The original function of the third floor level was to provide bedrooms, bathrooms, and recreation spaces for Cornelius and Alice's sons, Cornelius III, Alfred, and Reginald, who were aged 22, 18, and 15, respectively, when the breakers was completed. Additionally, there were suites developed for anticipation of the family's growth and accommodation for guests. The two floors of bedrooms in the staff wing were rooms for the housekeeper, female maids, and male staff, as well as guest staff. In this slide, you see a floor plan of the third floor showing the family portion in pink again, and a single staff floor in blue. On the plan, the bedrooms are labeled for each son, and the southeast family or living room is also labeled. The housekeeper's room is located in the northwest corner and is the first staff bedroom that you come to on entering the staff hall. The single floor of family space is around 10,000 square feet, and the combined two floors of staff space is approximately 8,000 square feet. Ultimately, it is the interpretation of the spaces that guides the conservation and restoration interventions. Interpretation of the third floor, as defined by our chief curator, Leslie Jones, is focused on the legacy of the Vanderbilts and their descendants who occupied the space for over 100 years, as well as the staff that lived and worked at the breakers. Therefore, it is not one period of significance, but three, which are interpreted here on the third floor. The earliest period being when the breakers was completed in 1895, the second being the 1950s, or thereabout the mid-century, 20th century, when Countess Gladys Sacchini, youngest daughter of Alice and Cornelius Vanderbilt, who inherited the house from her mother after her death in 1934, relocated with her family to the third floor to allow for the Preservation Society to expand their tours of the house to the public. The Countess Sacchini is shown here in the bottom left with her 5 daughters. Her daughters would inherit the breakers upon her death in 1965. Like their mother, the Sacchini daughters did not live in Newport full-time, but often visited. Of the 5, the most active with the breakers was Countess Sylvia Sapari. She's shown here on the bottom left, sitting on the east terrace of the breakers. In 1972, the Preservation Society purchased the breakers from the family, and in 1983, the Preservation Society gave Countess Sapari the authority to live on the third floor for the rest of her life, which she shared with the family until her death in 1998. The Museum Affairs Department, which includes curatorial, collections, and conservation, were only granted full access to study the space in 2018, after the last generation of family members ended their residency at the breakers. The spaces not only contained the original Ogden Codman furnishings, but the interior decoration was largely intact. From a conservator's perspective, this is about as good as it gets. The Preservation Society's 5-year strategic plan sets the aspirations of the board and management for the period of fiscal year 2024 to 2028. One initiative called out specifically in the plan was determining the appropriate next steps for the breaker's third floor. On April 23rd, the Conservation was tasked with developing a preliminary needs assessment for a public tour of the third floor. The goal was to ready the third floor for guided tours to begin in June 2024. With much research, analysis, restoration, and conservation work ahead of us, the idea of a preservation in progress tour was conceived. It would provide access for visitors while this multi-year project got underway. Based on our initial needs assessment, we prepared a multi-phase plan in which each phase would focus on achieving a sequence of tasks towards a final desired outcome, all leading to the final tour. The multi-phase approach had several advantages. A systematic approach to investigation and treatment over several years, improving familiarity with the space, and building expertise and partnerships. We could provide periodic updates of the tour to reveal progress and discoveries, adapting and reconfiguring as necessary. And occasionally, there would be the opportunity to see conservators in action. The greatest advantage of this approach was following the completion of the first phase, that touring of the space could begin by the deadline of June 2024. So the work completed to prepare the spaces for tours focused on treatment to repair plaster damage, repaint, and refinish the floors on the main hallways and a limited number of bedrooms and limited areas in the staff wing. We began in the fall of 2023 to perform condition surveys and documentation, paint examination, and color matching, all prior to the commencement of work. In the winter of 2023, work on the family apartment began with preparing the spaces for work to begin, following by restoration work listed here. It's quite a bit. Because our tour guests would need to ascend to the third floor via the family stair, that space was also part of the first phase. And to protect new work and collections in the future, UV film was added to the windows of the family side. Work progressed through the spring of 2024 and included some work in the staff wing as well. During this period, we began investigating the wall finishes in the staff hallway, which was once covered with a colored burlap-like fabric. The fabric was removed in 2000 and revealed a light bluish-green paint below. Through paint analysis, we determined that the walls in the hallway were painted at least 2 times prior to the fabric being installed. As seen in this paint cross-section, sampled from below one of the wood fabric battens, where layers 1 and 2 likely constitute primer and finish, original primer and finish, and layer 3 is a repainting. Our research into how ultimately to present this space is still ongoing. We are in the process of completing phase 2, which focuses on bedroom 17, bedroom 18, and adjacent bathroom. And Heather will speak more at length about this, our process in these rooms in just a few minutes. But you may ask why we chose to start with this particular room. The primary reason is quite practical. We wanted to complete the majority of the dirty work, plaster and paint work phases, before more complex work such as installation of reproduction textiles and installation of conserved objects occurred. And our plan here highlights the spaces where the work occurred. So you can see in this plan, bedroom 18, bedroom 17, and the bath. And then we also had some work going on again in the housekeeper's room. So I will invite Heather.
Okay, hi everyone. So using a detail of that floor plan, let's just orient ourselves a little further with the rooms we'll be discussing next. To start, bedroom number 17, and that number refers to the ultimate room number that they put on the outside of that door. We speculate the intention for this room was likely looking forward as the Vanderbilt sons grew up and married. This bedroom adjoins Neely's bedroom via a bathroom and was likely intended for his future wife. Ultimately, Neely did not stay here after he was married. In the 1940s, under the house's ownership by Neely's youngest sister, Gladys Cheney, she moved into this room when she allowed the Preservation Society to open the downstairs to public tours. A second bedroom, number 18, is connected to bedroom 17, likely meant for a future child. Once the Countess moved the family up to the third floor, it was given a new life as a dining space. Here are a couple of watercolors made by Ogden Codman for bedroom 17. Note the color palette, the white painted walls with the red wall upholstery. Now, to give you an idea of what that room looked like in 2023, before preservation began, we're going to take you on a brief virtual tour. So we're entering from the hallway into bedroom 17, and it's going to scan around for a minute. And then it's going to go back, and then this is facing west, so when you look out these windows, you're looking out onto the front lawn of the Breakers. And then it's going to pivot into bedroom 18, and you can kind of see there's like a table in there, which was sometimes used as a meeting space, and would be kind of akin to what this would look like as a dining space. So watercolor designs are usually a good indication of what the final interior will look like, but they are not exact. Changes do happen. Regardless, you can surmise from having just looked at the Codman watercolors compared to the video of the suite, there is a large difference in appearance that is due to age. Organic materials, like textiles, naturally degrade and break down. Linen and cotton darken over time and become susceptible to wear and tear. Other factors influence the rate at which textiles break down, including temperature, humidity, and pollution. Here on the right side of the image, you're seeing damage and staining to the wall upholstery from historic water infiltration. Another factor in the aging of textiles is light, which not only impacts the fibers, but the dyes. Here's a section of wall fabric which was behind a mirror. That mirror protected the fabric from light. The pink hue of the fabric is more akin to those Codman watercolors. Additionally, look at the trim, white on the left and beige on the right. This is not a dye shift, but the color shift that happens with cotton as it ages. For this set of rooms, they will be interpreted to the completion of the house in 1895, as Patty mentioned. There isn't a way to conserve or restore these fabrics to look as they did in 1895. And as such, it was decided these textiles would be removed, retained archivally, and replacement fabrics would be installed. Before any deinstallation or conservation work occurs, the rooms and materials were extensively documented with photography to capture the materials in their current state. So in addition to normal light photography, we take images using ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light can show variations in a material through differences in luminescence, and fluorescence is included in that. What you're looking at here is a detail of shutters in bedroom 17, with the normal light image in the middle and the ultraviolet light image on the right, where the wear and aging of the paint is reflected in the mottled fluorescence. We also recorded technical information about the rooms and materials. The size of each wall upholstery panel was recorded, noting the selvage edges of the fabrics used. The selvage is the width of the textile as it is produced on a loom. This yardage and selvage information can then be used to help us calculate how much material we'll need to recreate for each. For the fabrics and trims, further technical information was gathered. This included the weave structure, or the pattern made by the perpendicularly placed and intertwined yarns on a loom. Two common structures are plain weave and twill weave, the diagrams for which are on the right. The thread count is noted, which is the number of yarns per a certain length, often 1 inch. Additionally, any finishing techniques such as polishing or the felting of a fabric surface. Notes are taken about the condition of the materials and how they were installed or attached to the wall. We also confirmed the type of fiber of each fabric and trim through analysis. We first collect a sample where a couple of individual fibers from a yarn are removed using tweezers and, when necessary, fine scissors. Each location where a sample was removed is documented, a photograph taken, and annotated to include in the analysis report. The samples are examined using polarizing light microscopy, or PLM, a technique used for pigment, fiber, and fur identification. The characteristics that you see, size, color, and shape, are observed. What you're seeing here is a sample of wall fabric from this suite. You see roughly straight fibers with horizontal nodes, which are indicative characteristics of linen. Finally, more samples were taken for further instrumental analysis. We are working with colleagues in the Conservation Department at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields who are helping us with dye identification. Dye identification can help us confirm the original dye used, which gives us both more context around the fabrication of the materials in the space, but also allows us to better visualize what the original color would have looked like. Dye identification requires specific instrumentation, reference databases, and skilled staff which can interpret the data. It also requires somewhat larger samples than we use for polarizing light microscopy. This is because only the dye extracted from the sample is used for analysis. Given that, and factoring in the age and degradation of the materials, a larger sample is required to produce a larger amount of dye. What you can see here is a sample I took from a wall fabric after it was deinstalled. This allowed me to take a section that was part of the seam allowance and was hidden from view when on display. This means the visual integrity of that section of wall upholstery isn't disturbed by my sample taking, and additionally, it is much less light affected. This analysis is still ongoing. Now that we've documented everything and gathered our technical information, we started deinstallation of the wall panels. First, the rooms were prepped. Furniture was temporarily relocated to storage. Sconces were disconnected and removed for rewiring, noted here with blue arrows. Installed mirrors were similarly taken down and placed in storage, noted by the white star. Again, you can really see that color difference of the fabric behind the mirror and where it isn't. Next, we tested the best method for removing the wall upholstery. I found the metal upholstery tacks used to secure these panels were, unsurprisingly, heavily corroded after 100 years, and they were often fused to the fabric underneath. To reduce damage to the fabrics that would occur trying to remove each tack individually, the fabrics were instead pulled out from around the tacks. You can see the result of that in the inset blue framed image. Now, the exception to this method was around upholstered hidden doors marked by the blue star. This is because the doors were upholstered in a different manner than the walls. You can see our objects conservator, Carol Schuler, doing this work on the right, where each tack was pulled out from the wall to remove this panel. I also want to note that the panels and the trims were removed in tandem, that being the trim was not removed from the wall fabric, but it was retained in place, so each panel could be retained in the original format as much as possible. And now we've got one more little video, a little time lapse of Carola working on one of these panels. So she's working around the door now. And while she's doing that, our preventive conservator, Kara Kaminsky, is working on taking down a wall panel on the right. And then we're pivoting back, and now Carola, so around the door as well as the door itself was secured in a similar manner, so she's working around that door now. Give you an idea of how time-consuming this can be. This is, several hours worth of work. So you can see the stages of deinstallation here. Starting on the right, a panel where the fabric is intact except for the door. In the middle, this is what a panel looks like with the show fabric removed. And the show fabric is that final layer that you see in the room. There is a layer of cotton fabric that acts as a base for that show fabric, and its purpose is twofold. It provides physical support to the show fabric while also protecting the show fabric from dirt and dust. On the left is a panel after the underfabric has been removed as well. You can see the vertical support grid, which supports the center of the upholstery, and the wood border or the nail rail to which the fabric is tacked. After deinstallation, each panel was labeled to note which room and wall they were removed from. Then both the show fabric and undercover fabrics were surface cleaned with a HEPA filter vacuum front and back. And you might have gotten a sneak peek of this in the time lapse, but I want you to take note of this image. This is the back side, so the most interior part of an undercover fabric, which was adjacent a fireplace. So look at how much soot had collected on this piece of fabric. And that just really shows you that these fabrics are really acting as filters for the room, but not just the rooms, but the spaces between the walls. Then our deinstalled fabrics were rolled for storage. Each undercover was kept with its corresponding show cover fabric. Because of how sooty those undercovers were, even after vacuuming, the panels were interleaved with archival tissue to prevent any dirt transfer. You can see this on the left, where Kara and Carola are rolling up a panel. And then on the top right, after all the panels were rolled onto archival tubes and covered in a protective layer of Tyvek. After this, they were placed in designated rolled storage in Breaker's basement, which you can see in the bottom right. Through this process, we gain knowledge about the objects and materials in the rooms, but also about the people who have historically worked in these spaces. We found lots of inscriptions on the undercover fabrics and plaster behind the wall panels. On the left, you see an inscription reading C.W. Ox, 1902. Our amazing assistant curator, Eve Loftus, confirmed this, noting it is probably for Charles W. Ox, a policeman turned carpenter, and probably part of the family behind the Ox Brothers contracting firm in Newport. On the right are notes written about the room they were working in. First, dressing room is written, and the dressing is crossed out, and bed is added, so they got themselves turned around a little bit at first. And then we just had to include this very sweet drawing of a house drawn with a little bit of skill. It's unclear if it's a specific place, but it is evocative of, a colonial style house so prevalent in Newport. This is my fault. I have to pull up notes. So on the north wall in bedroom 17, we found a schematic drawn in pencil on a board for what we believe are early 20th century electrical modifications. Its location is indicated in the overall photograph by the blue box and shown in detail in the photo on the right. While Patty was working with the electricians this spring to rewire these rooms, Together, they hypothesized that the modifications were likely to add wiring for a wall switch, noted by the pink arrow, to the light fixture over the mirror, the attachment location indicated by the pink circle. Additionally, it is likely that the light fixture over the mirror was originally gas only, and the schematic also indicates bringing electricity to the fixture. The image on the right is a detail of the modifications uncovered. As we work with the electricians to rewire the spaces and examine the original fixtures, we are discovering more about early mixed use of gas and electric for lighting on the 3rd floor and later alterations. We also found evidence this was not the first time these walls were upholstered, so let me take you through this image. So in this image, the show cover was already removed, and the red dots show the tacks that were used to secure that fabric. The yellow dots show the tacks which are holding that undercover fabric in place. Now, these red circle locations are holes adjacent the tacks to secure the show fabric. And we also have another row of tack holes marked in yellow circles adjacent the undercover fabric. And these yellow arrows show corresponding holes in the undercover fabric. So this is a lot of holes, and this extra set of holes indicates to us that it was likely that the undercover was reused, and very likely the show fabric as well. This is potentially evidence of the fabric having been removed to update the lighting, as mentioned previously, and could explain the 1902 seen in these inscription with CW Ox. But we aren't certain about this. A little more research has to be done. In addition to this deinstallation, we have been working to source replacement fabrics and trims and using all that technical information gathered to do so. For fabrics, we are working with Schumacher. They already have a linen very akin to what was used in this suite. A color that comes with that line that's readily available is shown with the deinstalled fabric on the left. At the center, we are looking at some more of those readily available swatches in that line, but also a couple custom samples that were dyed specifically trying to get us closer in color. On the right is our latest custom swatch, and you can see we're getting much closer. Something to notice in these images is how much lighting affects your perception of the color of this fabric, and that's a factor we have to account for when making these decisions. For the trims, we are working with Samuel & Sons. They are custom weaving and dyeing the materials we need for this project, which includes 4 types of tape trims and 2 types of fringe trims, which are specifically for the window furnishings. We received the samples on cards, as you can see on the right, and then as we get closer in weave and in color to what we're looking for, we start looking at all of these sample fabrics and trims together, and that's what you're seeing in the left. And this is to make sure each trim that we use is not only correct in its own right, but works in harmony with all of the other materials that we're choosing for this project. Now, with the wall upholstery down, as Patty mentioned, the point is to get to the paintwork that needs to happen and could be addressed. So to refresh your memory, a detail of the Codman watercolor for bedroom 17 is on the left, with its corresponding location in the room on the right. And again, the watercolors, aren't gospel, things can change, but you can see how much the paintwork has discolored. So Patty's gonna come back up and speak a little bit more about the paintwork.
So visual examination of the paint in these rooms led us to theorize that the paint was likely original or retained or repainted to a close approximation of the existing. This was also based on our findings from paint examination elsewhere in the family hallway, where only 1 or 2 repainting campaigns existed, again, closely matching the original. For this project, approximately, just in this room, in these, I should say, 3 rooms, approximately 45 samples were removed from various elements of the wood panel from each room, so 45 samples total for those 3 rooms. We document the locations of each sample as shown in the photo on the left. So you see those small little blue tape arrows indicate the locations that we take the samples from. Samples are about 1 to 2 millimeters in size, and they are mounted in an epoxy resin disc, shown here in the center, and polished by hand to reveal the stratigraphy or layered history of the paint. And so I put a little pencil, sort of a mechanical pencil tip, so you can really get a sense of how small that little sliver is that's containing the wood, substrate, and the paint layers in that resin disc. And then samples are examined using microscopy techniques, including normal reflected light and ultraviolet fluorescence, where organic compounds such as binders or varnishes can exhibit characteristic colors and fluorescence intensities, which improve our understanding of the cross-section layers. Okay, this is looking at photomicrographs. This could be I'll give you a minute to kind of settle on these images and look at the ones on the screen on the left first, up top and bottom. So a photomicrograph of paint sample from room 17 shown on the left in reflected light on top and under UV on bottom. The 3 layers indicated constitute the original finish: primer, intermediate, and finish layer. In the UV, the finish layer fluoresces intensely due to the presence of the oil resin and the zinc white pigment in the layer. Note also the fracture in the paint layer, consistent with typical light degradation and friability of the paint layer. We found that the paint was mostly original, except in locations with evidence of disturbance to the panels, where we found localized repainting. Paint coatings on shutters and panels closest to the windows were degraded, brittle, and flaking. We even observed a slight visible difference in sheen or gloss that suggested the presence of a clear coat used to stabilize and preserve some of the deteriorated original paint layer. We found evidence of this in the samples shown here on the right. These are a little bit more difficult to see because the paint layers have sort of separated over due to degradation. But from those locations closer to the windows, where the paint was in poor condition, we see additional modern paint layer indicated as layer 5 on the very top, and the presence of what we believe to be a clear coat, stabilizing coat, indicated as layer 4. Overall, the existing paint was in fair condition, and although we could have stabilized the existing paint, the interpretation objective was to return this room to an 1895 appearance. As oil paint ages, the color can shift due to light exposure. Therefore, color accuracy of the paint would be important when combined with the new reproduction fabrics. The center photograph shows after repainting compared to the Codman design drawing. So, again, I think Heather mentioned it. As you notice probably through the photographs, depending on the light that's used when the photographs are taken, you can get, it has a little bit different appearance. And so sometimes when we use the room lights primarily and the natural light primarily, it tends to be a shade darker, sort of a yellowish cream color, meaning what it was originally or what it was prior to the repainting campaign. And then our photography that we typically take for documentation tends to be more, we use sort of a daylight-corrected photography. The center photograph is just taken with the natural daylight in the room, which I think it just really appears quite beautiful compared to, when you look at it compared to the Codman drawings. So this sort of takes us to our progress point at this time. But before I go into future planned work, I would like to present some information from Conservation Fellow Isabella Hogan. She prepared a summary of her excellent research into the furniture on the third floor for us to share with you this evening. Sort of a little bit of a glimpse into her August talk. So, most of the furniture produced and seen on the third floor was produced by A.H. Davenport, but we also have pieces from a French furniture manufacturer, POA. And tonight we'll focus on Davenport. A.H. Davenport would become an important manufacturer of luxury furniture in the Gilded Age, securing work with influential architecture firms such as Richard Morris Hunt, McKim, Mead & White, and H.H. Richardson. One of the largest collections of Davenport furniture is located at the Breakers. The furniture in the suite of rooms we're discussing this evening contains painted furniture, many with marble tops. On the left on the screen, you can see one of such pieces, a bureau with a furniture sketch by Davenport for the Breakers' third floor. This painted furniture is primarily made from cherry wood. Examination of the construction found distinctive marks from a circular saw, specifically the kerf, or notches from the blade, in the form of repeated swooping or curved lines. We believe that Davenport used steam-powered saws and planers in his East Cambridge factory rather than hand-powered machinery. To understand the age and composition of the finishes, small samples were taken, embedded in cross-section discs, and examined under raking visible light and ultraviolet light. Two distinct layers were visible in the cross-section, particularly in the ultraviolet light image. This examination is ongoing, but it is believed that both paint is original. Further analysis is also underway to identify the paint composition. Now, I'm just going to point out something a little bit here. If you're looking at that paint, you also see that distinct zinc, which would correspond with the room. So it's very important that this work with Isabella and her research is ongoing at the same time that we're doing our work, because we're looking at the finishes because we know that they would have to agree in the room together, the two colors working together. So this information has come out of Isabella's survey, which focuses on the materials, construction, and condition of the over 80 pieces of furniture. Isabella's future work includes identification of the paint and varnish composition, to continue her research into Davenport and Codman, and possible links with French furniture manufacturer POA. She will also work on approaches to treatment for the rest of the third floor to understand the necessary extent of intervention. We expect details of her work. We kept the details of her work very brief and hope that you will return for her lecture, Decoding Davenport, here at Rosecliff on August 5th, where she will delve into it all. Next steps. So as I mentioned, we are currently completing phase 2, which will go through the end of this fiscal year. We have proposed 2 more phases, I'd say 2 to 3 more phases. 2 of them are focused on the family wing, and they are really focused on the textile reproduction and installation in rooms 17 and 18, and then textile fabrication and installation for rooms 15 and 16. The 5th proposed would be for the staff wing bedroom treatments, but we really haven't gotten far in the research in those areas, so that still is being formed in terms of a proposal. And ongoing throughout all of this, we are slowly doing electrical upgrades, which are seriously needed on the third floor. I'll just give you, and I didn't put a picture in here, but when we were taking the light fixtures down, basically the wiring just was falling apart. So it was very necessary to rewire that third floor area. And then we also have to consider future things like expanding the climate mitigation. I mean, we're talking in the future, but expanding climate mitigation in the third floor because it is not linked with the geothermal that is currently being used at the breakers. So Heather and I would like to thank, mostly we really want to thank and recognize many of the consultants, contractors, and suppliers that we've been working on this project with and we're continuing to develop relationships with. I won't name them all, but they're here on the screen. And also, we would love to, acknowledge the rest of our Museum Affairs staff members who have helped with this project, including the curatorial team and the collections management team especially. Our fellows, Isabella Hogan and Laura Bergman as well. Laura helped with some of the paint analysis on the third floor as an addition to her own fellows research that she's been doing. And the properties department always is supporting these projects in many ways. The breakers caretaking, always supporting our projects that we do there at the breakers. Visitor experience, dealing with our changes and our adaptations of the tour as we continue to do work. We're very appreciative of their flexibility. And I'd also like to thank Dan Lane, who was the project manager for our phase 1 of the breakers third floor project. And with that, I'll invite Heather up here and open it up to any kind of questions. Thank you.
So if you have any questions, please just raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you. There's already a hand.
Do you know the suppliers or the manufacturers or the original wall fabric and trims and things like that and the paints?
We know a little bit, yes. So we do have some access to the original house ledgers from when they were building. And so we do know that specifically for both the second and the third floor, these fabrics came from William Baumgarten in New York City, who was, an interior designer, manufacturer like Davenport. All of these companies did kind of wholesale interior work. So we know that they did the fabrics for like the linen that's in these rooms specifically. Been doing a little bit more research to try to hone in a little bit more, but that's what we have right now.
I'm curious. I'm a guide, and I get a lot of questions about wall coverings. I don't do this tour, but in general, and how people are fascinated with the silk brocade wall coverings and are curious about how they're affixed to the wall. Some people say, is there glue, or why don't they sag? So if you could just briefly give me a sketch of that.
Sure. Yeah.
Head back to one of the other images.
Ooh. Okay, this is gonna go fast, don't look.
I thought the 3 was good.
The 3? Okay.
Yeah, the 3 is good. So that actually kind of explains it pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in my experience with wall upholstery, which is just here at the Preservation Society and is really just at the breakers and at the elms, they are both attached in really similar ways. So it's actually left quite a bit like more raw behind there than you think it is. So that's the plaster work you're seeing behind there on the left. And then they have this vertical wooden grid that is essentially what's used to support the wall fabric. And I don't know if you can see, it's much thinner, but there is a wood perimeter in that sort of inset panel. And essentially the wall fabric is just tensioned and tacked into place around that perimeter. Just around the outside. No, they don't tack into the middle at all, actually. So that's partly why those vertical support grids, but also why that undercover fabric is important, because it helps provide that sort of physical friction that's going to help support it over time. That being said, it does sag over time, that, a little bit, some fabrics more than others. And so this is held up really quite well compared to some. This is all on grain. If you've ever been to Chateau and you look in the stairwell, the fabric there is a little bit saggier, and that's because the fabric in those spaces is on the bias. And what that means is it's not on grain, so it's not sort of perpendicular, but it's at an angle. And the fabric has a lot more stretch in that direction, and so it sags more over time. But yeah, it's just that perimeter, and then the trim is typically a combination of fewer tacks, but some tacks, and then it's also just glued. Historically, it would have been like a rabbit or an animal skin glue. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say congratulations. It's an awesome project to all of you and your staff. I did the tour last Monday, and it's fantastic. I encourage anyone to go. I wanted to ask about the quality, what type of wood it was. Even up to the servants' quarters, it's the most beautiful wood. And I forgot to ask that question.
So in the third floor in the hallway, you have oak on the wainscot. So it's oak on the wainscot, it's oak on the floors. In the bedrooms that have exposed wood or finished wood, that's walnut. And then the painted wood, we haven't actually, I should say, when we did the repainting, all that was adding another paint layer over it. So it's not like we stripped everything or anything like that. So we haven't done, wood ID on this. I can look to Carola. Where are you? There you are. You're right in front. I don't know if she has any thoughts on what wood is used in the painted. Like we said, the furniture, for its hardness, they use cherry. In here, I'm not exactly sure. Me neither.
Another thing that I found fascinating was the dresser that you just showed. Mm-hmm. Has the same type of marble top as the fireplace. So
that's something that we've spent a lot of time trying to identify the different marbles that were used. And our research fellow, conservation research fellow, Isabel Hogan, has been looking at a lot of that furniture. And one of the first things that Carol and I have noticed about some of our other properties is that there is a similarity or an actual exact use of the same, intentionally, marbles in the room. Also, the marbles tend to coordinate in some way with the color scheme that's going on in the room. And it's all very, very well thought out. In some of the letters that Isabel has been reading in terms of her archival research, there is conversations between Richard Morris Hunt and Ogden Codman about the choice of marble. So it is a constant conversation. Nothing gets chosen unless it's been thoroughly worked out. And the marble tops are all original, and the furniture is in excellent condition.
I had people that I was touring around through the breakers, and they asked, are most of the furnishings original to the house, or had they been sold off and then trying to recreate what was there?
When the Breakers was purchased by the Preservation Society in 1972, it came with the furnishings. Now, that being said, a portion of the furniture was part of that sale to us, so it came directly to us. Many of the objects remained in the house after the purchase that are on loan to us from different family members. So many of the pieces that you see when you tour the house are actually loans from the family. So they tend to be mostly original to the Breakers. Some have come to the Breakers after, I forget what year it was, but basically Alice brought many pieces from New York to the Breakers, including some of the pieces that are in the morning room, were actually added to the Breakers interior in the early part of the 20th century, and they had come from their home in New York City.
Thank you.
Nope.
Probably in the back.
Way over there. Okay.
Get your steps in, Kat.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Again, wonderful presentation. Very exciting. two questions. One, when in a previous talk, they said that there were looms and fabric and sample weavings of some of these fabrics. Is that also a consideration for you to reconstruct or to investigate? And my second question is, you've turned the room around, much to my chagrin, because I couldn't sneak in the back when I came in late. But the tapestry behind you is absolutely outstanding. So you're talking about fabric, and I'm so distracted. I hope you have a story there. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand your first question exactly, but I just want to reiterate that all the fabrics that, if you go to tour the third floor of the breakers, all of the fabrics you see on the wall there currently are original. So they are in their original state. I mean, they're in their original location. They have not been removed. On the second floor, most of the reproduction work on the second floor for the bedrooms for display was done, those were all reproductions that were done in the 1980s. And many of those fabrics, we have samples, maybe pieces of those. Some of them are displayed in the room, but we don't have whole, we didn't preserve them in the way that we're preserving these at the time. They were taken down and not wholly preserved, but we're preserving every single panel that we take down from these rooms. So we will always have them, right? So that we will always have them to go back and study. It becomes part of our collection. It becomes an important, basically physical document for, say, 50 years from now, they go, well, these are reproductions. Where are the originals? Well, they're in the collections. They're in storage, and they're there to be studied at any point in time. Oh, in Prel? Oh, that's a whole different house. But I just say that we have many ongoing projects, and one of them is a sort of long and drawn-out one that's happening in Mr. Berwin's bedroom. So that fabric, the original fabric in Mr. Berwin's bedroom at the Elms, was removed in the early 80s, the original fabric, because it was 100% silk. So it was sagging and tearing and removing itself, essentially, from the walls. And so that was removed and replaced. It was not replaced in kind, so it wasn't replaced. It was replaced with it's a cotton weave, and I think it was from Schumacher.
It was like a more readily available.
Readily available. Print was considered to be, similar, something similar in terms of the color. We have yet to find an actual physical sample of that was withheld from that removal period. We do have photographs, and we do have the design cart from Prel, which is displayed in that room. And so we're in the process of a couple of things happening at the Elms, some interpretation changes and things like that. But I think one of the things is when the furniture came back, the original furniture came back to that room, that was when we decided to turn around and reinterpret the walls. And so again, we're phasing that project out. First, we worked on the furniture. We've done some paint work in that room. And now we're looking at replacement of the fabric, maybe, in the next year or so.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, applaud. Thank you so much to Patty and Heather. That was amazing and super interesting. And thank you all for attending and for being members. Your membership and your visitation, everything, it supports our mission. It supports this work. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your evening. I hope to see you again soon. And on your way out, we have a little goodie for you. So don't forget to grab one. Have a great night. Thank you.